Well, good morning. Some key issues are surfacing in the state legislature. We'll take a look at them from a Democrat perspective starting right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, State Representative Sarah Cambenzi was elected last November to her second term in the Michigan House. She represents the 109th District, which includes Alger, Luce, Schoolcraft counties, and most of Marquette County. Pleased to welcome Representative Cambenzi back to the Ryan Report. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for having me.
The last time we talked here, you were in the race for the seat.
Yes.
Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you.
Starting this term must be a lot different than last time when you had to start in the middle of a term and didn't get the usual orientation that lawmakers get and just kind of jumping right in.
Absolutely, and the tone has changed. Having a Democratic governor now, we still have the majority Republicans in the House and in the leadership in the Senate, but having a Democratic governor, there's more of a vibe to work together and get stuff done.
And this is your second term, even though the last term was an abbreviated term. That will count as a term in the term limit situation.
It will,
okay.
Correct.
Now you've been named the Democratic floor leader. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm an assistant to the
right.
And basically I was asked by him to represent more of the rural areas in Michigan, and I thought it was a great opportunity to have a seat at that table, to be able to know what legislation is coming at us and to be able to look at it before it hits the rest of our members to say, is there an amendment that I need to bring up? Is this what's best for the UP and rural areas in Michigan? And typically we don't have that from the UP, so it's good to be in that position.
Okay. And what committees will you be serving on this year?
So I'm in Reg Reform. I'm also back on Natural Resources, a great fit
right.
for my district, and I'm the Minority Vice Chair of Commerce and Tourism.
Also a good fit.
Also a great fit.
Do you have any special legislation that you have in mind that you want to bring before those committees?
Yeah, I think you'll see a piece of legislation to look at an overall strategic plan for mining in the UP. Right now, we've got interests of other mining companies that want to come in and either explore or possibly start a mine. We've been used to just our iron mines, but things are changing again, and we're kind of in that upswing without a long-term plan. And what do we need for infrastructure? What do we need for energy? And what do we need to make sure that Michigan is on top of their game when it comes to mining and the success?
And speaking of that, there was some potentially good news last week when the chairman of Cliffs mentioned that Empire might be getting close. Have you had a chance to check that out any further?
I have, and knowing that there is going to be a significant pellet shortage in the near future, it just positions Empire to be in a good spot to supply those extra pellets to the market.
Has the state been able to do anything to support them in this project?
So far the state has come back with a job offer and economic development package, but not of any significance. So we'll probably be looking at what kind of jobs can they help create and bring back? How many jobs can they save and possibly transition from We Energies when that plant goes down? And looking at ways that other entities other than a tax break, get an economic package that says, thank you for keeping those good jobs here. We're going to help you invest.
You mentioned electric power, and of course that is moving forward, and that was a concern at one point. It appears that plant will be opening in the next month or so, and the Presque Isle plant will be shutting down.
Yes.
That's going to have an impact on the city of Marquette, of course.
Huge impact on taxes, yes.
Right. Will this new plant that's being built provide the necessary energy that will be needed for these mining projects going forward?
If we see Empire come back online, we still have an energy component piece that we need to solve. Whether it's through transmission, is it through generation? Whatever it is, we feel in the 2-year time frame we'll be able to help solve that for Cliffs.
You're in a different situation this year, being the only Democrat in the UP delegation.
Yeah.
Are you building some bridges with your Republican colleagues?
Absolutely. And, it's just carrying on the tradition that, whether there have been Democrats or Republicans in office, we stick together up here. We're only 3% of legislators in Lansing, and we have to work together. We have to have each other's backs and, make sure that on the Senate side, Ed knows our concerns and our legislation coming forward, and, vice versa on our side.
It's kind of unique that the Speaker of the Michigan House now has part of his district in the UP.
Yes.
A Republican, Chatfield. Do you have a relationship with him, a working relationship?
I do, and this is a good thing for the UP, knowing that he understands the needs of the UP, the more rural areas. He was a big supporter of our resolution to reopen the Empire Mine. I have no doubt that he's going to be a big supporter going forward with the things that we need.
One of the issues you were really concerned about in the last term was school safety.
Yes.
How do you feel we're doing on that issue now?
We were doing better. I would say a lot of the credit should go to the OK to Say program, and that was from Attorney General Bill Schuette. Really forward thinking, put that in place. And I know from talking to our Michigan State Police in the UP, the first year they had over 600 tips on that anonymous line, whether it was school, whether it was instances in the community surrounding schools. And we were told that there were 3 instances that if they had not had a call from someone, could have been fatal. So we know that it's working. We know there's a lot more work to do, but the issue is not going away. Governor
Snyder said he didn't want to have a knee-jerk reaction, so he appointed a commission. They came out with some pretty extensive recommendations toward the end of last year, but I don't know if they got lost in the shuffle with a new governor and the legislature changing. Is that something the governor and the legislature will follow through on?
I think it is. I think it comes down to funding too. I mean, a lot of those recommendations, whether it's structural improvements to schools, certainly making sure we have enough counselors and social workers, it's going to come down to how do we fund it. And I think that's where you're going to see the fight. This is, broad support, both sides of the aisle issue, so I don't see it going away.
Okay, we'll come back and talk about more of that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report in 2 minutes. Guest this morning is State Representative Sarah Cambenzi, talking just before we went to the break about funding for school safety. And there are so many demands on that purse, aren't there?
Absolutely. And I think what you're seeing in the last several years is that we have no longer paid for our colleges, our community colleges, out of the general fund. We've actually taken that $1 billion out of the K-12 school aid fund. Certainly not illegal to do. But what that does is it shortchanges a school district the size of Marquette about $2.4 million extra dollars a year. That's a lot of money that could go towards school safety, extra teachers, transportation.
There are some people that feel if the schools were adequately funded, they could make all of these decisions, not just school safety, but curriculum and the rest that go with it.
I agree.
Do you agree with that?
And I would say, if we weren't taking that college funding out of the K-12 budget, I think we'd be okay. We'd be close to the mark we need to hit from all the studies we've done as a state to say this is what we should be funding our schools. So I think the money's there. It's just prioritizing it, making sure it goes specifically to K-12.
There was a Michigan State University study recently that said Michigan has actually cut back on funding for education, that it's, I believe, about 82% of what it was in 1985.
Yeah.
Do you think that study is accurate?
I do, and I think it's, we're one of a few states that doesn't use property taxes to fund our schools, so, we're pulling from a mix of areas to fund them and supplementally fund them. Some of the sales tax now coming in, there's a big fight. Should it go for infrastructure? Should it go for education? Those type of decisions, because of how it's set up, gives the legislature a lot of leeway, and that's when that money becomes vulnerable.
I think several years ago, I'm not sure exactly when, schools began to, maybe not just schools, but we all began to realize that we couldn't just be training kids for college. We had to be training kids for jobs in the future.
Absolutely.
Put more of an emphasis on career and technical education.
Yes.
Are we moving down that road fast enough, do you think? Are we making the changes we need to make?
We are. I mean, there's about an 800,000 job opening shortage right now in the skilled trades. So we know that we could have a lot more people at work if they had the skills. I think the new training center that's being built just down the highway here is a good example. Northern Michigan University was able to capture through the supplemental funding at the end of last year the $24 million they need to build and revise their skilled trades Jacob Eddy Center. So we're getting there, but there's going to be a shortage.
There is also a concern about the cost of a college degree in Michigan. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things I try and tell people is that, we're a relatively low taxing state, but the reason it doesn't feel that way, we're about 13th lowest for income tax, is because our standard of living and our per capita income per household is much lower. We're almost $10,000 lower than Minnesota, that's almost right next door. And so the type of jobs we create, the things people are doing, how successful they are, play into how we can tax people and really, how they feel about taxes.
One of the other issues, shifting gears, is Enbridge Line 5.
Yes.
And toward the end of the last legislative term, Republicans basically came up with a plan to build a tunnel or a corridor, or the governor did, with Enbridge. And you supported that plan. And I know you've got some criticism for it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if it was just, do we want a pipeline going through the straits with oil in it? The answer would be no across both aisles. But because this pipeline is 20% of our regional energy, simply shutting it down is not an option. If we were to look at building an entirely new pipeline around Lake Superior and the Great Lakes, it would be much longer than 10 years. And so when you started to look at the likelihood of a huge spill, just how Enbridge is flowing crude oil through there, the safety precautions in place, to me, it made more sense to say, let's take the next 7 to 10 years and make it safe. Let's decommission this old line and put basically a double wall around it and, put it under the straits, make it safe, and not disrupt our oil, not disrupt our propane. And so, at the end of the day, instead of letting my emotions make a decision, I really had to use the data that was in front of me.
I know the new governor and attorney general have expressed concern about it. Do you think it will stay on track?
I do. I think they have a duty. It was legislation that moved quickly. We had to, change the legislation and, make sure that it wasn't under the bridge authority anymore, that we actually, set up a different authority to manage it. And so it was clunky. I guess that's the best way to describe it. But, what they're really looking at was the legislation and how it was formed and worded, done correctly. And I think it protects the institution. I am supportive of them looking at that. Doesn't change how I feel about supporting the tunnel.
Okay. Got some other questions, other issues in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after this break. Once again, our guest this morning is Representative Sarah Cambenzi. Some issues just don't seem to want to go away, do they? Let's talk about a couple. The
Sure.
big box store issue.
Yep.
Again, the way we're property taxing some of the large big box stores.
Yes.
Are we going to make any progress this year, do you think?
I think you would see support in the House. Again, where I think we're going to come up short is certainly in the Senate. I still think they have the majority there that probably doesn't want it, and I think that's going to be the stopper. I think some of us are thinking, if we know we can't get legislation passed, is there an alternative? Is there a group that might want to do a ballot initiative on this? And so this year, I think we'll get a better understanding of what direction we need to go.
And much of the opposition seems to come from major business groups like the State Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
What are they objecting to? Just paying more tax in general? Is that their concern?
I think there's a big push right now. You see it with some of the members. They took a no tax pledge, and basically, they just don't want taxes increased of any kind, and they feel already they're paying too much. And so, when I look at it, when other people in local government look at it, when you think of all the services provided, police, fire, water mains, infrastructure, roads, what they're getting for the price they're paying is a great deal. And we're not that that far off from other states. We're actually middle of the road, 25th in terms of property taxes as a state. So I think it's reasonable to ask them to pay what they're paying and pay their fair share.
And if they aren't, then of course somebody else is going to, and that's going to be some
Absolutely.
smaller mom and pop shops and
Yep.
residential homeowners.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see what happens because it's been with us for a while. Another one,
Yes.
of course, is car insurance.
Yes.
And I realize it's a very complex issue, but I know
Yeah.
there's been legislation introduced in both the House and Senate,
Yes.
and it certainly was a major issue for a lot of people in the campaign.
Yep.
What do you think can be done?
I think we have no choice now as legislators to pass something. You're going to see us pass some sort of reform, and I think every entity involved is going to give a little. Insurance is going to have to give a little. Our hospitals, in terms of, do they have a fee schedule in terms of reimbursement? They're going to have to give a little. And, you're going to see us look a little bit more like another state, say New York, that still has no fault, but has caps on lifetime benefits and other things. So a little more transparency, not getting rid of no fault, because, I think that would be the wrong way to go and go back to a tort system. But I think you're gonna see us just have a better handle on regulating the insurance, the auto insurance industry.
And it is kind of interesting, in studying up a little bit about it, being someone a little older and being on Medicare, I've kind of joked about the fact that, a healthcare provider
Yeah.
can send me a $10,000 bill and Medicare says, no, we're paying $3,000 and this is your share.
Right.
But with people in this particular program, the auto insurance program, it doesn't work that way, does it?
No. Nope. And what I try and tell people is right now we spend a relatively low amount per dollar, per person on Medicaid. And if we didn't have auto no fault and we didn't have an auto fund to pay for people who can't pay for it, it would increase what we pay for Medicaid. And again, those dollars come from typically general fund dollars. So you would see a greater shift from car insurance, what people pay personally, to taking another big bite out of our state budget.
So we do have a new governor, and we do have a lot of talk about bipartisanship. We'll see how that all works out.
Yes.
Hopefully well on
Yeah.
both sides. But some of the issues she's raised, you just mentioned Medicaid. There was some
Yep.
concern about the legislature last year, or the Republican leadership, put some restrictions on Medicaid.
Yes.
And I think she's somewhat concerned about that. Do you think it will change, or are her concerns legitimate?
Yeah, when we signed on, I do understand where the Republicans are coming from. I mean, we signed on and said that as long as this program doesn't cost more to implement than it does to run, we're okay with it. The problem is that with 40% of people in Michigan living at or below the poverty line, we have, about 180,000 more people on Medicaid than we expected. And I think what you saw is, how do we deal with this? Are work requirements really the way to go? Or do we focus on more economic incentives to get people to work, to get higher paying jobs in our communities and get people off of that assistance?
We have less than a minute. One of her major issues was also fixing the roads.
Yes.
Do you think anything new is going to happen there, or
Absolutely.
did we do what we've done?
No, I think you're going to see a lot of changes, and if we can't come up legislatively on both sides, the House or Senate, where that money's going to come from, you will see her go forward and ask the people what plan they prefer. So,
Okay. So we're going to fix
we're
the
going to
roads.
see it, yes.
Okay. She also wanted to repeal the pension tax. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Interestingly enough, right now we have two legislators, both Republicans, who have introduced bills in the House and Senate, to repeal that. And I think it's great. Again, it's where do we find the money?
Well, that's good for some of our retirees.
Yes.
Thankfully, I'm old enough that it doesn't even affect me. So
Yeah.
Thanks very much for coming in this morning.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. So, I went to the refrigerator the other day to get the milk. I wanted a glass to drink with my sandwich for lunch. When I looked at the container, the date had expired the day before. The date was February 13th. The date on the milk was February 12th. Now what? I really wanted that glass of milk. I looked at it, smelled it, carefully took a small sip, and then poured myself a glass. It was fine. Matter of fact, I finished off the gallon the next day. So this is something else we have to deal with in this day and age. Best By dates. They come on almost any food-related item we buy. They used to be more specific with use-by dates, but I think they went to the Best By date when they realized that a lot of food was being thrown away and wasted. Now they leave it in your hands to decide, do I eat it or not? But exactly what does that Best By date mean? You can spend a lot of time researching that subject and still not be certain. When you go to a supermarket's meat department, you'll usually find a date on the products there that says use or freeze by such a date. Pretty specific. Eat the meat by that date or put it in the freezer. Otherwise, throw it out or eat it at your own peril. But Best By, that's pretty ambiguous. How long after the Best By date is it still pretty good? And could we also put that date on the package? That would be the pretty good buy date. And on what date is it absolutely horrid? That would be a good date to see on the package as well. And what happens when you get to that date? Will it poison you or just taste bad? And of course, many of us who have been around this planet for a long time grew up with the idea that if it was in a can, it was good forever. If you had a can of beans from World War II, it was still okay to eat. Not anymore. All of the cans come with Best By dates. If you have any cans on your shelf without any kind of date, you know they've been hanging around for a long time. I have to admit I've thrown a few cans out when the date was about 2 years ago. How did we forget about those sitting in the pantry? Like everything else in life today, the dates they put on the foods we eat are here to stay, regardless of what they mean. They're probably better than no date at all. I do know this. If they start putting a Best By date on people, mine would have expired a while back. I'll be back in a minute. Our time is up for another week. We do have time to remind you that the best source for news anytime is UpperMichiganSource.com, where you can also see a replay of this show each week. Thanks to Representative Sarah Cambenzi for joining us this morning for a legislative update. And thank you for being here. Hope we can meet again next Sunday morning.